It's finally spring in Eagle Nation. I'm normally coming to you to talk about students and programming, but another part of my job is working with staff and the school board to ensure financial stability. It's that time of the year when we plan the next year's budget. So I've invited Jason Mutzenberger, Executive Director of Business Services, to join us today as we talk about his favorite subject, school district finances. Our budget development process is transparent, and the school board will review and approve the 2022-23 school year budget before July 1st. Jason and I want to share some highlights, and we'll also talk a little bit about inflation and the school district's property tax.
Thank you, Josh. The first things to highlight are school district revenues and expenses. I hope the viewers love a good pie chart because I have too. If anyone wants to take a deep dive into this topic, all of our budget information is on the Finance Department webpage. The first chart shows revenue. As you could guess, this tells us where our funding comes from. The two biggest pieces of the pie are revenue from the state budget and revenue from property taxes. 70% of our budget comes from the state of Minnesota. A little over 20% comes from local property taxes.
That 70-20 split is very common among school districts in the metro area. The takeaway here is that our local funding from homes and businesses is essential to the operation of our schools. And we are grateful that our community has been so supportive over the years.
Looking at expenditures, the biggest pieces are employee salaries and benefits, and that makes sense. Education is an industry like healthcare that depends on people for our operations. We need teachers, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, custodians, and child nutrition staff so that we serve each student at school every day.
Eden Prairie Schools is one of the largest employers in the city, with over 1,500 full-time and part-time employees. Just like other large employers, our staff help support the local economy when they eat, shop, and use services from businesses in Eden Prairie. Jason, when you talked with the board in March, you noted that inflation on utilities is 6%, and for fiscal services like property insurance, it's 8%.
Yes, inflation affects us like it does everyone else, and some of those increases are passed on to the school district, just like prices in the grocery store or gas station. But that's only half the story. Schools have been feeling the pinch of inflation for nearly 20 years.
School superintendents are very familiar with this chart. The bottom line shows actual revenue from the state. Remember, that's our largest source of revenue. The top line is what revenue would be if state funding had kept pace with the Consumer Price Index.
That gap represents $8 million annually for Eden Prairie schools. That gap is also why historically the school board has asked residents to consider a levy referendum.
The revenue from the 2014 levy referendum is the reason Eden Prairie Schools has not needed to make budget cuts, although we have continuously looked for efficiencies. At that time, we promised we would use the levy funds to avoid budget cuts for 5 years, and we'll be going on year 9 without any cuts.
While other districts have had to increase class sizes and reduce programs to balance their budgets, Eden Prairie Schools has had none of that, and that is all because of our community support.
Maintaining that promise from the last levy allows our schools to deliver an outstanding education for our students. Thank you for taking the time to hear about the school district's finances, and hopefully this helps explain why we are grateful to be a part of a community that is so supportive of its local schools.